Toto Wolff's secret investment web. He wasn't just running Mercedes, he was quietly planting flags across the F1 map. Toto Wolff's empire didn't stop at the silver arrows. It extended into enemy territory. Wolff joined Mercedes in 2013, acquiring a 30% ownership stake in Mercedes-AMG Petronas. But what many fans don't realize is that he never fully severed ties with Williams F1, where he'd previously served as executive director. In fact, Wolff held a 5% stake in Williams until April 2020, despite competing directly against them. Even more controversial was his investment in Aston Martin, purchased in April 2020 when the company's stock price had plummeted amid COVID-19 market turmoil. Wolff bought nearly 1% of Aston Martin Lagonda Global Holdings plc just months before the team rebranded into Aston Martin Cognizant F1 in 2021 under billionaire Lawrence Stroll, whose son Lance now drives for them. The overlap raised immediate concerns. Aston Martin runs Mercedes engines, receives access to wind tunnel data, and began hiring key Mercedes personnel like aerodynamicist Eric Blandon and engineering director Andrew Green. The FIA's governance code discourages cross-team influence, but Wolff insisted the move was purely financial. Critics weren't convinced. In July 2021, Red Bull boss Christian Horner pushed back, telling The Telegraph, "The question is whether shareholders of a team should be privy to confidential information of competitors." That same year, the FIA quietly initiated an internal review. No penalties were issued, and by 2022, Wolff had reportedly reduced his Aston Martin shareholding, but the optics lingered. Adding fuel to the fire, Aston Martin's car in 2022 resembled a green Mercedes, triggering paddock jokes and suspicions of intellectual property sharing. Mercedes denied any wrongdoing. Wolff's business empire also spans beyond 100 advisory, multiple startups, and even electric scooter companies, revealing a deeper pattern. He plays a long game that blurs the line between competition and control. And while he's never been formally sanctioned, the story shows one thing clearly. Toto Wolff wasn't just leading Mercedes, he was buying influence in places no one expected. Christian Horner's internal investigation scandal. He led Red Bull Racing from obscurity to 4 straight titles. But in 2024, Christian Horner found himself at the center of a scandal that nearly cracked the team's billion-dollar image. What started as a quiet HR complaint exploded into one of Formula One's most turbulent off-track controversies in a decade. In February 2024, a female Red Bull Racing employee filed a formal complaint against Horner, alleging inappropriate and controlling behavior. Red Bull's parent company, Red Bull GmbH in Austria, immediately commissioned an independent investigation led by an external London-based barrister. The investigation was supposed to be confidential, but from the beginning, the media firestorm couldn't be contained. The case dragged on for nearly 4 weeks, with over 150 pages of material reportedly reviewed, including WhatsApp messages, emails, and internal team reports. On February 28, 2024, Red Bull officially cleared Horner, stating there was no evidence of wrongdoing. But just one day later, a cache of alleged messages, some sexually suggestive, was leaked anonymously to hundreds of F1 personnel and media outlets. This wasn't just about Horner anymore. It became a proxy war between factions inside Red Bull. Insiders believe the leak came from a high-level source trying to undermine Horner's leadership. Rumors swirled that Red Bull's Thai majority owners, who hold 51%, were unhappy with the Austrian-led management, especially after the 2022 death of co-founder Dietrich Mateschitz, who had been Horner's staunchest supporter. Even Red Bull's star driver Max Verstappen got pulled into the storm. His father, Jos Verstappen, told The Telegraph during the 2024 Bahrain Grand Prix that Horner was playing the victim while destroying the team from within. That quote went viral, and the paddock knew the fracture was real. Despite the mounting tension, Red Bull's board stood by Horner, but the pressure continued to mount, with the original complainant reportedly launching legal appeals and considering action with the UK's Employment Tribunal. By April 2024, Christian Horner was still in charge, but his public image was no longer bulletproof. Sponsors like Oracle and Mobil One reportedly requested private briefings, while rival teams watched Red Bull's off-track implosion with quiet satisfaction. And here's the most chilling detail: no one knows who leaked those messages. To this day, that shadow figure remains anonymous. Flavio Briatore and Crashgate, a staged crash, a secret plan, a Grand Prix win built on deception. In 2008, one of Formula One's most outrageous scandals shattered the career of a flamboyant boss, Flavio Briatore, and left the sport scrambling to preserve its integrity. The event in question? The 2008 Singapore Grand Prix. This was Formula One's first ever night race, a dazzling spectacle on the Marina Bay Street circuit. Fernando Alonso, driving for Renault, started a lowly 15th on the grid, yet by lap 61 he crossed the finish line as the winner. It didn't make sense, not until the truth came out. What few knew at the time was that Alonso's teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. had intentionally crashed his car on lap 14, slamming into the wall at turn 17. The crash triggered a safety car, which allowed Alonso, who had just pitted moments earlier, to leapfrog to the front, while others were stuck behind the pace car. Renault's team boss, Flavio Briatore, along with Executive Director of Engineering Pat Simons, were later revealed to have orchestrated the crash. The plan: rig the race to give Renault a win, impress sponsors like ING and Mutua Madrileña, and secure Briatore's contract renewal. Alonso notably denied any knowledge of the plan and was later cleared by the FIA. The secret held for almost a year, until August 2009, when Piquet Jr., recently dropped from the team, blew the whistle. He submitted a signed statement to the FIA alleging he had been ordered to crash deliberately. Emails and telemetry data soon backed up his claims. The fallout was swift and brutal. In September 2009, Renault accepted the charges but avoided a direct race ban due to exceptional cooperation. Instead, the team received a 2-year suspended disqualification. Briatore was handed an indefinite ban from F1, while Simons received a 5-year suspension. Both bans were overturned in French court in 2010, but neither man returned to the sport in the same capacity. What's astonishing? Renault's win stood. Alonso kept the trophy. The podium never changed. Crashgate, as the media dubbed it, remains one of the most flagrant examples of race fixing in F1 history. It was a moment when winning meant risking everything, and for Briatore, it cost him everything he had built. Ron Dennis and McLaren's $100 million espionage scandal, a suitcase full of secrets, a rogue engineer, and a fine so massive it shook the sport to its core. In 2007, McLaren, under legendary boss Ron Dennis, was caught in a spy scandal that became Formula One's costliest punishment ever. It started with Nigel Stepney, a disillusioned Ferrari technician who had been sidelined after internal disagreements. Stepney had access to Ferrari's entire technical dossier, including engine maps, tire data, pit strategies, and fuel systems. In an act of betrayal, he passed 780 pages of confidential Ferrari documents to Mike Coughlin, McLaren's chief designer. The leak was so brazen, it even involved Coughlin's wife, Trudy Coughlin, who took the physical dossier to a photocopy shop in Woking, triggering suspicion from an alert staff member. Ferrari caught wind and launched legal action in both Italy and the UK. At first, McLaren claimed the documents had no influence on their car design, but a twist came when Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, then teammates, got caught in the middle. In a power struggle within McLaren, Alonso threatened to expose internal emails showing Coughlin had circulated Ferrari's data to senior engineers. The email surfaced during the Hungarian Grand Prix fallout, where Alonso had blocked Hamilton in the pit lane, and FIA President Max Mosley ordered an emergency hearing. The result? On September 13, 2007, McLaren was slapped with an unprecedented $100 million fine and excluded from the 2007 Constructors' Championship, even though their drivers were allowed to continue racing for the driver's title. At the time, it was the largest penalty in sporting history. McLaren was also required to submit their 2008 car for FIA inspection to ensure it hadn't benefited from stolen Ferrari knowledge. While no direct technical copying was ever confirmed, the political damage was irreversible. Ron Dennis, who had built McLaren into a powerhouse with 8 constructors' titles, faced mounting pressure. By 2009, he stepped down from the F1 team to focus on McLaren's road car division, eventually leaving the group entirely in 2017. The scandal, later dubbed Spygate, it wasn't just about espionage. It revealed the cracks within McLaren's hierarchy, the fierce rivalry between 2 world champions, and the desperation that comes when billion-dollar stakes are on the line. Jean Tots' Ferrari power structure and the era of team orders. For nearly a decade, Ferrari wasn't just a team, it was a monarchy. And Jean Tots wasn't just team principal, he was the architect of a one-man empire empire. At its center, Michael Schumacher, whose reign at Ferrari came with unquestioned privilege and no tolerance for internal rivals. Jean Todt took over Ferrari's racing operations in 1993, inheriting a struggling team that hadn't won a constructor's title since 1983 or a driver's title since 1979. To rebuild Ferrari, he assembled a super team, Michael Schumacher from Benetton, Ross Brawn as technical director, and Rory Byrne on car design. Together, they turned Ferrari into a juggernaut, but it came at a cost. Schumacher won 5 consecutive drivers' titles from 2000 to 2004, and Ferrari clinched 6 constructors' championships between 1999 and 2004. But as dominant as they were, their methods raised ethical red flags, most notoriously through team orders. At the 2002 Austrian Grand Prix, Rubens Barrichello, who had qualified on pole and led every lap, was told on the final corner to move aside for Schumacher. The result? A staged finish that prompted boos from fans, outrage from commentators, and a furious backlash that echoed worldwide. Even Tots later admitted it was clumsy, but at the time, Ferrari didn't hide it. The podium ceremony turned surreal when Schumacher tried to give Barrichello the winner's trophy, and the FIA launched an immediate investigation. Though no sporting rule had been technically broken, Ferrari was fined $1 million for bringing the sport into disrepute. This wasn't an isolated incident. Under Tots' leadership, Ferrari employed coded radio messages, like "Barrichello, you're slower than expected," to enforce internal hierarchy. Many insiders said Schumacher had the full weight of the team behind him, from preferential strategies to bespoke car development. Even Ross Brawn once admitted Michael was the team leader and the team was built around him. The backlash grew so intense that by 2003, and the FIA officially banned team orders that interfered with race results, a rule that stayed in place until 2010. Yet Tots' system delivered unparalleled success, and in 2009, he was elected president of the FIA, a role he held for 3 consecutive terms until 2021. The irony? Tots' Ferrari would be remembered not just for winning, but for controlling the very definition of what winning meant: Helmut Marko's ruthless Red Bull Jr. cuts. For most drivers, getting into Formula 1 is a dream. For Red Bull's juniors, it can feel more like survival. At the center of this high-pressure system is Helmut Marko, a man whose approval can launch a career or end it in a single race weekend. Helmut Marko, a former F1 driver and Le Mans winner in 1971, has led the Red Bull Junior Driver program since its founding in 1999. His mission? Discover and develop young talent to feed Red Bull's F1 ambitions. And at first glance, it worked. The program produced Sebastian Vettel, who became the youngest F1 world champion in 2010, and later Max Verstappen, who won his first race at just 18 years and 228 days old. But for every success story, there are a dozen cautionary tales. Marko's approach is cold, numbers-driven, and unapologetically harsh. He's known for cutting drivers mid-season, often after a single poor performance. One of the most infamous cases? Daniel Ricardo, promoted to Red Bull in 2015, then demoted back to Toro Rosso by 2016 after a single on-track incident with Vettel. The decision was so abrupt it blindsided even Kvyat himself, who later said, "I was used, then thrown away." The same happened to Pierre Gasly in 2019, who was promoted to Red Bull after an impressive stint at Toro Rosso, only to be demoted just 12 races into the season. Gasly later admitted he suffered from depression and self-doubt after Marko's decision. Red Bull justified the move by citing poor performance, but insiders argued the car's setup was tailored to Verstappen, making it nearly impossible for a second driver to thrive. Jaime Alguersuari, once the youngest F1 driver in history, retired from racing altogether after being dropped from Red Bull's program. In a 2022 interview, he confessed he was still haunted by Marko's management style. "It was fear, pure fear. We were all terrified of losing our seats at any moment." Marko has also faced accusations of bias. In 2021, rumors spread that he vetoed Sergio Perez's contract extension, allegedly stating, "We don't need another Mexican," a quote both he and Red Bull later denied. To date, Red Bull's junior program has burned through over 15 drivers in less than 2 decades, making it one of the most brutal development systems in motorsport. Yet it continues to churn because in Marko's world, only one result matters: winning. But Cyril Abiteboul's legal war with Daniel Ricardo. It was meant to be a fresh start, a top-tier driver, a rejuvenated factory team, but when Daniel Ricardo blindsided Renault by walking away, team boss Cyril Abiteboul didn't just take it personally, he considered legal action. In August 2018, Ricardo shocked the F1 world by leaving Red Bull for Renault, a team that had finished the previous season 6th in the constructors' standings. At the time, Renault's revival was in full swing, powered by a massive €1.2 billion factory modernization effort and bold promises to challenge the top teams by 2020. Ricciardo reportedly signed a 2-year deal worth $35 million, making him one of the highest paid drivers on the grid. The partnership started with optimism. Abiteboul saw Ricciardo as the face of Renault's F1 future, but results didn't match the hype. In 2019, Renault slipped to 5th in the standings, with reliability issues, poor aero, and a major regulation breach that got both cars disqualified from the Japanese Grand Prix. Then came the breaking point. In May 2020, Ricciardo informed Renault, just weeks into the COVID-delayed season, that he had signed with McLaren for 2021, replacing Carlos Sainz Jr., who was heading to Ferrari. The announcement stunned Abiteboul. In interviews, he made no effort to hide his feelings. "We have to accept some decisions that are not ours," he told Sky Sports, his voice tight. "It is painful." Behind closed doors, tensions worsened. Renault reportedly explored contractual clauses, including breach of negotiation obligations, as Ricciardo had allegedly spoken with McLaren before informing his own team. Legal threats never materialized publicly, but sources inside Renault suggested that internal counsel reviewed the terms of Ricciardo's contract for potential penalties. The atmosphere in the garage turned icy. By season's end, Ricciardo had secured 2 podiums, the first for Renault since 2011, but the team barely acknowledged them. During the 2020 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, cameras captured a visibly awkward farewell between Ricciardo and Abiteboul. No handshake, no warm words. To make matters worse, Abiteboul himself was pushed out just weeks later in January 2021, as Renault rebranded to Alpine. He never returned to F1 in a team principal role. What began as a hopeful alliance ended in silent warfare, bruised egos, and unspoken grudges. Stefano Domenicali's Ferrari ties and F1's power balancing act. He's supposed to be neutral, impartial, the steward of the sport, but Stefano Domenicali's past at Ferrari still casts a long scarlet shadow over everything he now touches. Domenicali served as Ferrari's team principal from 2008 to 2014, leading the Scuderia through a transitional era. Under his watch, Ferrari narrowly lost the title in 2008 with Felipe Massa, and again in 2010 and 2012 with Fernando Alonso, despite brilliant drives and late-season charges. Domenicali was admired for his calm, professorial demeanor, but critics said he lacked the ruthless edge needed to topple Red Bull's dominance during Sebastian Vettel's 4-year reign. He resigned in April 2014, taking responsibility for Ferrari's declining performance, but his exit didn't mark the end of his influence. After brief stints with Audi and Lamborghini, Domenicali returned to F1 in January 2021, this time as president and CEO of Formula One Group, replacing Chase Carey. That's when the whispers began. While Domenicali technically reports to Liberty Media, his deep roots at Ferrari, over 2 decades of service, including as head of HR and team manager, have led to frequent accusations of favoritism. In 2022, several mid-grid teams quietly raised concerns that Ferrari was receiving favorable media positioning and sponsor access, particularly at showcase events like the Miami and Las Vegas Grand Prix, where Ferrari enjoyed prime visibility. Things grew more contentious in 2023, when Domenicali strongly supported Liberty's push for sprint races, a format critics argued benefits teams with dominant machinery, namely Red Bull and Ferrari. Smaller teams like Haas and Alfa Romeo opposed the move, citing cost and risk. Still, Domenicali pushed it through. Then came the Andretti Cadillac controversy. Despite clearing the FIA's technical and financial criteria, the Andretti Global F1 bid, backed by General Motors, was stonewalled by Liberty Media in early 2024. Domenicali publicly questioned whether an 11th team would add value. The result? A backlash from US fans and politicians who accused F1 of gatekeeping and protecting legacy teams, especially Ferrari, whose historic veto power still looms over sport decisions. Behind the scenes, insiders say Domenicali favors closed-door Concord Agreement revisions and selectively filters media access, reinforcing the sense that F1's leadership remains tightly interwoven with its elite teams. To his credit, Domenicali has overseen
record profits and global expansion. The 2023 Las Vegas GP alone generated over $1.2 billion in economic activity, and global viewership surged past 1.55 billion cumulative viewers in 2022. But the question lingers, can a Ferrari man ever truly be neutral in a sport where every millimeter and every dollar can tilt the championship? The engines may roar on Sundays, but the power game's behind closed doors. That's where F1's real drama plays out.